Well, we're back. You're watching BookView Now on pbs.org. Now you're going to be watching Geraldine Brooks, who is famous for historical novels like the Pulitzer Prize-winning March, Year of Wonders, and People of the Book. With The Secret Chord, which is available October 6th, Geraldine goes way further back in history, actually, all the way to the Second Iron Age, 1000 BC, to the story of King David, who is much more than just his famed battle with Goliath. Here's Geraldine, who came by our set yesterday for a nice interview. Geraldine Brooks, we're sitting here right now at BookExpo America. It's wonderful to have you. First of all, welcome.
Well, it's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's great. Your new book is called The Secret Chord. Your readers know you from Caleb's Crossing, from The People of the Book. This one, and all historical novels, but this one you went back much further than the Civil War or some of the other eras that you've covered previously.
Way back there, very deep into the well of our
the
past.
Iron Age, to be exact.
That's right.
Yeah, BC.
That's right, 3,000 years ago.
Yeah. So where did the fascination come from? We should say that the book is about David, of David and Goliath fame, King David, a famous historical figure, biblical. Where did your interest come from?
It was my oldest son, when he was 8 years old, decided that he had a burning desire to play the harp, and I thought that was a pretty unusual thing for an 8-year-old boy.
8-year-old?
Yeah.
Wow.
But,
percussion,
I'd been thinking drums, I was kind of braced for drums, but he wants to learn.
Drums in my house, yeah. Maybe lucky, yeah.
He wanted to learn the classical harp, and it was sitting there in his lessons watching this little guy dwarfed by this beautiful concert instrument that his teacher had that made me think about that long ago boy harpist. And I realized that apart from the cliched stories of David and Goliath, David and Batsheva, I really didn't know anything about him. And so I did something I hadn't done since I was a kid and went back and read the Bible. And the story of David just blew me away because everything happens to him. And as a historical fiction writer, I realized that this is the first piece of history writing that we have that tells a man's life from beginning to end. We meet him as a nobody, a spurned child of a large family. And we watch his rise as a hero and the favorite of a king. And then we see him fall into disgrace and have to go on the run when the king turns against him. And then he comes back and he takes over and he builds a kingdom. And then power corrupts him.
Yeah.
And his own family is just a rat's nest, a bunch of snakes. And he has the most extraordinary experiences of love and hate and joy and pain. And then we follow him all the way to his deathbed. So he's one of I think the first man in history, you could say.
Did you know when you were researching this that you were onto a trail that was going to lead to a book? Did you feel that it was happening when you were on that research trail?
I felt it. I felt very compelled by the breadth of experience that this one life encompassed. And then I came across the thing that I really knew I had a book through the character of Natan, who is the guy who comes into the king's life just a few times, but always with one purpose, to say, you suck, basically.
Yeah.
He is the guy who castigates the king, and he's described as a prophet. And I thought, well, what is that? And what is the career path for the guy who tells truth to power?
Yeah.
So he becomes the voice of the novel.
Yeah, that's a fascinating person, and whenever you find that person who's strong enough to stand up to someone as powerful as David, they are fascinating human beings.
Yeah.
How much was written about? I mean, there isn't a lot out there about
Outside the Bible?
Yeah.
If you go looking on it for historical record, we have one inscription referring to King David.
Yeah.
Everything else is archaeological inference. We have buildings that may have been associated with a leader of that stature at that time.
Right.
But the rest of it, it's the Bible or bust, really. And what's fascinating, though, is I do completely believe that he must have existed. Somebody like him must have existed, because nobody makes up a leader with so many flaws.
Yeah, so the storytelling component of the Bible versus what actually happened, how do you tell the difference between what's real and what's not?
You can't, but that's the beauty of fiction. You don't have to.
Yeah.
So I followed the story as it's presented, but tried to strip back some of the overlay and say, well, what did it mean to be a leader in Second Iron Age Israel? What was it like to be a shepherd in the Judean hills? Well, that actually I could find out. I went and herded sheep in the Judean hills. And so you could feel what it was like on your skin to be out there in the heat and the long days. And then, went down in the tunnels underneath Jerusalem to find the buildings that are associated with him, and talked to military strategists to say, the Bible says he conquered Jerusalem, but how did he do it? Because it was so well defended. And I got these guys who were, big shots in the Israeli army to sort of ponder with me, how did he take Jerusalem? And that was fascinating.
Yeah, that sounds like one of the most fascinating bits of research you've done for any of your books.
It was great, yeah.
What about the Iron Age itself, or the Second Iron Age? How much information exists about what normal everyday life was for people who lived at that time?
A lot, actually. So, and what I love about archaeology, the important things get written down, and things that people feel aren't important get thrown in the trash.
Right.
But in the trash, you often can find the difference between what people want to present and what really happened. And there is a lot of archaeological evidence about daily life, how people ate, how their households were organized, and from that you can infer a lot about the position of women. And women are huge in David's story. We know about Batsheva, but there are many other strong, powerful women. And the Bible's not usually that good about telling women's stories, but there are a number of women's stories in David's life that I absolutely love.
Tell me a little bit more about David. Some of the things, like, we know what we know, to your point, but you're David in the story, and some of the elements that you extrapolated from what you were able to find out to put into the book.
I think in the end you have to ask a question, which is, are human beings essentially the same through the ages in the important ways? Or are these people from the past so different that we can't imagine ourselves into their lives? And I come down very much on the side of saying the human heart doesn't change. Hatred feels exactly the same today as hatred felt 3,000 years ago. Passionate love, the kind of desire that will allow you to rip your soul apart and do things that are wrong just in order to consummate this relationship. I don't think that's any different today. We see it with our politicians. It's no coincidence that David Petraeus was known as King David.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
maybe if he had had a Natan saying, hey, don't be doing that.
Yes, that
he
truth
wouldn't.
to power person.
Yes,
We need
yes.
that.
We're not as good at as David was. I think our leaders today don't listen as well as he did. And so that's one of his admirable characteristics, was that he took criticism and he listened.
So you've made a name for yourself as a wonderful historical novelist. It's where you find inspiration. It's where you go. It's the well you go to over and over again. Do you think of yourself that way, or is this just where your inspiration comes from? Are you always thinking, what's the next bit of history that I can go mine? Or are those just the ideas that present themselves to
They
you?
seem to be the ones that I hear an idea and I can see how to write that book. And it's interesting that it's the past, because actually my own reading interests are often more to do with the future. I love science fiction.
Oh, do
I
you?
love speculating about the future.
Yeah.
But I don't feel inspired to write that. I love to read it. But what inspires me are these voids in the past where you know something fascinating happened, but you don't know all the details of it, so you have room for the imagination to engage with it.
So how do you feel when you think about your love of the future? How do you feel that past sort of affects some of that? I mean, there's obviously a historian in you that is part of your craft, but how do you see that past affects, when you think of the story of David, how it applies to modern day life?
Well, I think we can learn a lot from the emotional truths of his story, and particularly what happens to him when his sons turn out to be brutal and amoral. And how does he deal with that, and the pain of dealing with that as a father? And then, fortunately, for the narrative arc of his story, it's all redeemed in his late-born son, Solomon, who is just a wonderful person, and he comes to sort of be the salve on David's heart after he's been so disappointed with his other children.
And how about your own children? You mentioned your son inspired the book with his Does he still play the harp? And
He does, yeah,
and
he does.
Is he excited to know that he had something to do with this book?
Yeah, he is. He is. My oldest son gave me the idea for the title because at his bar mitzvah he played Leonard Cohen's song Hallelujah,
Oh, it's
which
lovely.
starts with the line, "They say there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord."
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, good for your kids for doing this, and wonderful for you too, Geraldine Brooks. The book is The Secret Chord, and it's really lovely to have you here. Thanks so much for joining PBS at BookExpo America.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck to everything.